Okay, hi everybody. Sorry it took me a little bit to get this together for you, but I wanted to make sure I was thorough. So, without any further waste of time, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see this presentation at the same time, hopefully. Never really quite sure if it's working. Okay. All right, so let's get started. First thing we're going to talk about is professionalism, and I highly encourage you to read Chapter 1 again of Nursing Now by Catalano. I know you guys have read this before. You had it in Dimensions. You have it again in Rule and Scope, but it's a really good chapter to kind of talk about professionalism and the challenges that we face as nurses to gain control of our practice. So the main question is nursing a profession, or is it simply a job or a career to be fulfilled? There's definitions that support and negate the argument. A position is a group of tasks assigned to one individual. A job is a group of positions similar in nature and in skill level that could be carried out by that individual. And an occupation is a group of jobs, which is similar in the type of work and usually found throughout the industry or workplace. So then what is a professional? It's someone who belongs to and practices a profession. A profession is a type of occupation that meets the criteria of having the following traits. They have high levels of individual responsibility and high intellect. They have a specialized body of knowledge, something that maybe the lay public doesn't have. They have knowledge and an education that was gained through an institution of higher learning, like a college or university. They have public service and altruistic activities to them. They actually gain more prestige with this than they do financial gain. They have a relatively high degree of autonomy and independence of practice. And they have a need for a well-organized and strong organization that represents the members of the profession and it controls the quality of that person's practice. They also have a professional code of ethics that guides the members of the profession in their practice, and a strong professional identity and commitment to the development of the profession. They demonstrate professional competencies, and they have a possession of legally recognized licensure. So although a great number of nurses are looking at nursing as a life's work or a calling, there's an awful lot of us that still treat nursing just like a job. And nursing is the only major discipline that does not require its members to hold at least a bachelor's degree in order to gain licensure. Associate degree programs continue to maintain high enrollment, and they graduate large numbers of students who are ready to enter the workforce and be recognized as professional registered nurses. Whether a baccalaureate nursing degree should be the minimum requirement for entry-level nurses remains a really hotly debated contact issue, although the ANA first said they should in 1964. So how can nurses gain power? Well, through professional unity, membership in nursing organizations. The most powerful groups are the ones that are united. And the professional organizations, such as ANA or NLN, can speak for the group with one voice. Politicians are going to listen to two things: the number of votes and the dollars that are contributed to the campaign. And nurses have tremendous potential to influence both of those issues with the political process. Yet, less than 10% belong to the American Nurses Association, or the ANA. And nursing has a lot of specialty organizations. They're great, and some don't always get along with the others. So why don't nurses join the main organization, the ANA? Excuses? Well, they have a lot. They'll say it costs too much. They'll say they don't have the time to do anything with the organization. Or they'll think that the ANA doesn't do anything for them. Ethics is a system of valued behaviors and beliefs that declare what is right and what is wrong and what ought to be. And by now you should be familiar with the ANA Code of Ethics, and you should be acquainted with its concepts. An ethical dilemma problem occurs when something cannot be solved solely by a review of scientific facts and data. It involves a conflict between two moral imperatives. The answer is going to have profound effect on the situation or the client or the family. And when facing the situation, ethical decision-making is the process by which a decision is made about the issue. So just remember to review your terminology. You have autonomy, which is the ability to understand that the patient is the one making personal decisions, even if you don't agree with them. Beneficence, which is care that is in the best interest of the patient. Fidelity, keeping one's promise to the client. Justice, which is fair treatment in matters related to physical, psychosocial, care, and resources. And non-maleficence, the nurse's obligation to avoid causing harm to the client. Veracity is the nurse's duty to always tell the truth. Ethics has several definitions, but the foundation is based on an expected behavior of a certain group in relation to what is considered right and what is considered wrong. Morals are the values and beliefs held by a person that guide their behavior and decision-making. Utilitarianism, or teleological theory, decision-making based on what provides the greatest good for the greatest number of individuals. Deontology is decision-making based on obligations, duty, and what one considers to be right or wrong. We talk about communication, particularly in nursing. I want to remember that there are different kinds of communication. There is assertive versus non-assertive communication. Assertive communication is honest and direct. It's accurately going to express the person's feelings, their beliefs, their ideas and opinions. And any nurse leader can use an assertive communication style. It takes a little bit of practice sometimes. You want to encourage nurses to communicate openly, and that's often going to settle any kind of dispute you might have on the floor. Your non-assertive behaviors are submissive and aggressive. Submissive communication allows the rights to be violated by others. And we talked a lot about this when we talked about emotional intelligence and the fact that some people are just doormats. They let people walk all over them. These people's requests and demands are surrendered to others without regard to their own feelings and needs. Sometimes nurses use this as an avoidance. They just want to get along. But eventually, all that bottled up frustration can come forth and not be free. Aggressive communication is used to humiliate, control, or embarrass other people, or lower another person's self-esteem. It creates an I win and you lose situation. And the other person may perceive the aggressive behavior or communication as a personal attack on themselves. Nursing informatics gives us tools to measure effectiveness with accurate information about client care and outcomes. It's a standardized language in practice and in dissemination of the information that we gain. This process forms the basis for evidence-based practice. It gives nurses access to the most recent information. A new article is added to the medical literature every 26 seconds. No single person could read everything published. Another reason for the use of informatics is telehealth, which is healthcare at a distance. Providers are increasingly using telehealth to examine and treat clients from alternative locations, and they use video cameras, telephones, things like that. This can save money by eliminating office visits, but there is still usually a fee involved for the online appointment. Several nursing organizations are raising concerns, though, about this type of care, which may be kind of cookie cutter, and the physician may not actually get to know their clients. The use of nursing informatics for the improvement of evidence-based practice includes accessing current literature with the latest diagnostic techniques and treatment modalities, including drugs. You know there's a new drug on those tests every single time you open another ATI exam. This gives nurses the ability to confer with knowledgeable colleagues or experts in the field, and evaluates the effectiveness of previous experiences by looking at the patient's past medical history, which is already in the electronic chart. It's very convenient to use informatics, especially if being utilized outside the acute care facility. Labs, outpatient clinics, physicians' offices, home health agencies are now able to access the chart if they're using the same technology. The negative points in increasingly higher technologies are that they're really, really expensive initially, and then there's a learning curve if they don't stay up to date with the latest and greatest technology. There is a large problem getting older, experienced nurses to want to use the equipment. Electronics are unfortunately still subject to going down or having power issues. And there's also concerns about privacy and access to information that's available out there in the system. Who owns that information? Who should be able to see it? These are questions we need to be asking ourselves. Nurses need to remember that the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, we need to keep patient information safe and secure. And our Code of Ethics prohibits us from sharing information without need, and HIPAA makes it illegal to do so. And those two factors alone should keep nurses abreast of how informatics can be abused. So we need to take steps to be sure that abuse doesn't happen. Leadership is engaged decision-making and connects the actions used in clinical situations for which no standardized solution may exist. With that in mind, realize that any nurse may, in fact, be a leader. Nurses make decisions and problem-solve issues at all levels, all the time, in all healthcare venues. Using one's individual traits and personal influences to interact in resolving problems is a really good definition of nursing leadership. And there are three categories of nursing leadership styles. There's authoritative, also called autocratic. These leaders make decisions for the group. They tend to motivate by coercion, and communication kind of goes from the top down. Staff work output is usually high, and this makes it a great style to have in crisis or emergency situations. The democratic leadership style has the group making decisions. They tend to motivate by supporting achievements made by group members, and they communicate both up and down the chain of command. The staff's work output is pretty good because cooperation is valued and appreciated and encouraged. Laissez-faire, which is a French phrase meaning leave it alone, style, these leaders make very few decisions and do very little planning, and they rely on their staff's motivation to get the job accomplished. Communication goes both ways, but work output might be low unless an informal leader emerges from within the group. However, this style of leadership can be effective with very professional employees who have personal integrity, accountability, and are self-motivated. In addition, transformational leaders empower followers to assume responsibility for a shared goal or vision, and their personal development is a secondary but great outcome. Transactional leaders focus on immediate problems, maintaining the status quo, and using rewards and/or punishment to motivate followers. Management, on the other hand, is a process of guiding others through a set of derived practices and procedures. And these processes are evidence-based and routine. However, they are becoming really complex with additional responsibilities being given to nurse managers. Managers are generally appointed, hired, or otherwise given responsibility, whereas leaders kind of emerge from situations. Managing can also refer to control of one's own individual work, energies, and emotional intelligence. Followership is being part of the group being led or managed. We're all followers at good times, but an effective follower not only contributes to the good of the team, but provides feedback to the manager or leader in order to identify problems and find solutions to them. Following is just as accountable as leading or managing. Quality improvement, or QI, consists of systemic and continuous actions that lead to measurable improvements in health-related services and in the overall health and safety of your individual patients. Quality management, then, is the use of those performance standards and ongoing quality improvement efforts to achieve high levels of patient safety and satisfaction. In other words, we're trying to improve patient outcomes at the least possible cost. The Institute of Medicine, or the IOM, in 2000 issued the report To Err is Human, which identified over 98,000 patient deaths attributed to medical errors. This pointed out to all healthcare personnel that the problem was not simply related to isolated occurrences, but it was really widespread, and it was way more prevalent than first believed. Additionally, hospital administrators and chiefs of staff and nursing officers needed to be more accountable for what was happening on the floor. In another publication, Crossing the Quality Chasm by the IOM, released the following year, identified the aims for providing safer health care in a clinical setting. They state that all patient care must be safe, effective, and patient-centered, timely, efficient, and equitable. Most hospitals and healthcare agencies have risk management departments, which are designed to handle situations that may put the facility at financial risk. They are there to help prevent litigation. Those teams look at medical errors, patient falls, pressure wounds, hospital-acquired infections, etc., in an attempt to do damage control and correct any problems. They also identify potential problems, nurses playing a huge part in reporting these risks. Of course, there are behavioral changes needed for real quality improvement and for risk management. Occasionally, nurses don't report the problems due to fear of punishment or losing their jobs. Well, we know what they are: short staffing, 12-hour shifts, floating to other units where you don't feel safe. This all contributes to nurses' anxiety. Anxious nurses are more likely to make mistakes. Healthcare organizations need to cultivate environments of safety, not blame. Evidence-based practice is an organized method for clinical decision-making to provide the most effective care to patients. Evidence-based practice uses current research findings, and this defines best practices, clinical knowledge, proficiency and expertise, and values to optimize patient outcomes as well as quality of life. Research is typically defined as generation of new knowledge. EBP is a priority for all healthcare providers in order to ensure our patients' safety. This promotes the use of effective strategies to help patients be well. It also helps nurses prevent harm to their patients, to themselves, or to the global community. Florence Nightingale is considered the first person in nursing to use research to elevate it to the status of a profession. And simple sanitary practices such as hand washing, promoted by Nightingale, became commonplace in modern society. The Institute of Medicine has called for nurses to be educated in EBP. The recommendation is that all healthcare professionals be able to do the following: know where and when and how to find the best possible sources of evidence. Formulate clear clinical questions. Search for relevant answers to those questions from the best possible sources. Determine when and how to integrate those findings into practice. And how can you do this? How can you conduct and use research to improve your nursing care? Well, several strategies can help nurses use research. Attending conferences or poster presentations is an excellent way to quickly view findings and network with the researchers and other practitioners. Other strategies are conducting research via textbooks, procedure manuals, connecting the research used to a facility's goals, their mission statement, developing committees between colleges and hospitals, and inviting nurses to present during routine meetings and conferences. Look for sources that are peer-reviewed and less than 5 years old. If the values of the nurse's primary group vary greatly from those of the study group, for example, if you work with pediatrics and you're reading a study on the elderly, it's likely the recommendations may not work well. Make sure that they fit your needs. Technology makes the locating and dissemination of the research possible and necessary. Until very recently, it took 17 years from publication to clinical practice. And the goals of EBP include cost-effective practice based on the data produced by research, the dissemination of data, the implementation of best practice interventions. So this requires a utilization of collaboration and teamwork across the whole professional spectrum. Clinical recommendations evolve from this process, and this presents the nurse with sound decisions that are made on best practice. Associate degree nurses are expected to be able to demonstrate awareness of the value of research by becoming knowledgeable consumers of current information and by helping identify problems within their own scope of nursing practice that warrants exploration and maybe improvement. Are you ready to be that nurse? One can define patient-centered care as a focus on the patient and the individual's particular healthcare needs. That makes it sound really simple, doesn't it? But the goal of patient-centered care isn't really quite so easy. It requires the empowerment of patients to become more active in their own plan of care. And this means providers have to develop great communication skills to help the patient understand and advocate for himself. Care which is once directed by the physician must now be rendered with the patient, not to the patient. And the emphasis of said care being on what is provided, not who controls the decision-making about the care. According to the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, or the AHRQ, healthcare has been evolving away from the disease-centered model and toward a patient-centered model. In the past, disease-centered model had doctors making all treatment decisions. And now with the patient-centered model, patients can become active participants in their own care, and then they receive services designed to focus on their individual needs, their own preferences, in addition to getting advice and counsel from healthcare professionals. When the Institute of Medicine published Crossing the Quality Chasm, it established 6 aims for healthcare improvement. That report went on to acknowledge things that nurses commonly value, such as the idea of a healing environment, think Florence Nightingale again, individual care, autonomy of the patient in decision-making, evidence-based decision-making, and the need for transparency. Nurses are accountable for protecting the rights of all our clients. Situations that require particular attention include informed consent, refusal of treatment, advance directives, confidentiality, and information security. It's the nurse's duty to know where her or his patient is on with these sensitive issues before a problem arises, and then to advocate for protection of the client's rights should that occur. Nurses must ensure that clients understand their rights, and nurses must also protect the client's rights during all their own personal nursing care. So how can you as a novice nurse become more involved? Well, most legislators don't have a background in healthcare. They need to hear from professionals in healthcare, and especially nurses. So you can visit your congressman, senator, council members when they're in their hometowns. You could write letters to the editor, make phone calls, and serve on committees. But the easiest way to join is be active in a professional organization, such as ANA or NLN, or any of your specialty organizations. The ANA and most state chapters have legislative toolkits which offer suggestions for nurses to become politically involved. They maintain that the numbers of registered nurses in our country should make us a powerful force to be reckoned with. Our respect and ethics makes us valuable assets to any elected official. They want us on their side. There are categories of collaborative care. Nurse-to-patient collaboration, where nurses coordinate with patients the many issues surrounding health promotion, disease prevention, treatment methods, lifestyle changes, and even end-of-life decisions. Even Florence Nightingale taught collaboration with the patient, assessing what is needed or wanted by a patient. Then there's nurse-to-nurse or intra-professional collaboration. Nurses work in teams in hospitals and clinics and communities and provide collaboration and support in patient caregiving. From various units, fields within different experiences also collaborate. Nurse managers, nurse researchers, nurse educators, advanced practice nurses, and even novice nurses like you are going to be collaborating with expert nurses. Mentoring is just one example of collaboration. Shift handoff is another. Interprofessional collaboration. This is the category that often comes to mind when you think about collaborative care. Nurses form partnerships between the team of healthcare providers from medicine, pharmacy, OT, PT, RT, dentistry, social work, education, and even law. The ANA Code of Ethics and CUSIN both address interprofessional collaboration as an important, critical part of patient care. Finally, there's interorganizational collaboration. Nurses need to be aware of and utilize the resources and information between the organizations that are going to benefit patients at the local, national, and even global levels. Examples of this are hospice care at the local level and healthcare consortiums at the national level. In all cases, nurses need to have respect. Respect for the patient, respect for other nurses, respect for other disciplines, and learn to work together. For delegation, RNs have the authority or legitimate power to analyze assessments, plan nursing care, evaluate nursing care, and exercise nursing judgment, which includes delegation. There are 5 rights of delegation. The characteristics are from the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. The right task. The activity falls within the delegatee, or the person you're delegating to. Their job description was included as part of the established written policy and procedure of your practice setting. The right circumstance. The health condition of the patient must be stable. If the patient's condition changes, the delegatee must communicate this to the nurse, and the nurse must assess the situation and the appropriateness of the delegation. The right person. The nurse, along with the employer and the delegatee, is responsible for ensuring that the delegatee possesses the appropriate skills and knowledge to perform the activity. The right direction or communication. Each delegation situation should be specific to the patient, the licensed nurse, and the delegatee. The licensed nurse or the registered nurse is expected to communicate specific two-way and ongoing communication, and then should give the opportunity to ask any clarifying questions. The delegatee must agree to accept the delegated activity. For the right supervision and evaluation, the nurse is responsible for monitoring the activity, following up with the delegatee at the completion of the activity, and evaluating patient outcomes. The delegatee is responsible for communicating patient information to the nurse during the delegation situation. Ideally, health promotion methods are patient-centered. They use evidence-based practice and research, and they account for cultural differences and preferences. Optimal health, as previously mentioned, may be very individualized. Nurses promote health in many ways, including working with an individual or family to enhance health, working with communities to enhance health, participating in the development of health policies and laws, and all nurses use assessment, planning, and implementation of interventions and the evaluation of health promotion strategies for clients. The very nature of nursing places a huge responsibility for enhancing the health of individuals across the lifespan. This requires skillful communication by the nurse. So the nurse needs to be keenly aware of vulnerable populations. Who are they? Children, particularly infants, are often vulnerable to disease and illness, as are the elderly. Keep in mind those simple facts is going to help you assess risk and identify learning needs to promote optimal health. However, the most vulnerable populations are those individuals living in poverty and those of minority status, at least in the United States. The more educated a client is, the more likely he or she is to comply with teaching. Poverty and certain minority states can interfere with that education. Cultural competence is important to facilitate the use of culturally appropriate interventions, of course, based on values and beliefs of the targeted group. Nurses have to be committed to developing skills and cultural competence. They need to be aware of their own biases, Nurses must be respectful of the client's wishes. Many patients practice methods of healthcare that are considered alternative because they're outside the realm of our traditional Western way of practicing healing and treatment modalities. And these patients are going to seek care providers that practice the concept of holism, or treating of the whole person, rather than just the physical symptoms of a disease. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the IOM in 2008 said 80% of all registered nurses should have a bachelor's degree by the year 2020. We're in 2017. We're not there yet. We're close to 50%, but not 80%. Through its deliberations, the committee developed 4 key messages. Nurses should practice to the full extent of their education and training. Nurses should achieve highest levels of education and training through an improved education system that promotes seamless academic progression. What that means is that it should be easy for you to move from your ADN to your BSN and your BSN to your MSN and onward into the DNP. They also said nurses should be full partners with physicians and other healthcare professionals in redesigning healthcare in the United States. Effective workforce planning and policy make better data collection, better information infrastructure, and nurses have to have a seat at the table when we're talking about any kind of healthcare reform. For patient education, the Institute of Medicine established 10 rules for patient safety, and 4 of those are related to patient teaching. The Joint Commission requires documentation of patient teaching in the charts, and they do make surprise visits to facilities to ensure teaching plans are being carried out. Remember to use the nursing process. Assess your patient's abilities, needs, and comfort level. Plan your outcomes for your teaching. What do you want your patient to accomplish? Nurses are responsible for providing health information to the patient in the language and at the educational level he understands. A working knowledge of diverse cultural groups can facilitate health education. Cultural backgrounds strongly influence attitudes and beliefs about health. So the nurse has to determine not just the client's fluency with the language, but their secondary language, and can they read in those languages? Be aware that printed materials have been translated directly from English might not carry the same message as the patient's colloquial use of a language. When in doubt, use an interpreter to translate important words. Some patients may speak enough English to communicate, but they don't always necessarily understand medical language. Nurses also need to be aware of a digital divide, which means patients without internet access can be at a disadvantage for finding out additional information on their own. Many patients do have computer access, but only through a cell phone or a public library, school, or other such location. And these patients might have difficulty finding appropriate resources. They're going to need more solid referrals, maybe brochures, rather than directing them to websites. Finally, let's talk about burnout. It's characterized by extreme fatigue, maybe exhaustion, frequent illnesses, headaches, overeating or stress eating, insomnia, sleep disturbances, mood swings, emotional displays, anger, guilt, anxiety, even depression. And new nurses often fear burning out, but they block the signs because they put so much time and energy and money into preparing for a career they just don't seem to want anymore. The people who are most likely to experience burnout tend to be very intelligent, hardworking, and idealistic. Sound like you? And this makes them candidates for the syndrome. So what can you do to avoid culture shock and burnout? Set personal goals. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Is this nursing position, the first one you took, is it a stepping stone? Or do you want to stay here? Do you want to make this your career? If you have perspective for yourself, you're going to help create survival plans. And if you're working towards something you really want, then the effort it takes to fix the problem is going to be worth it. Trust me. Identify the problems. What's causing the stress? Is it time management on the floor? And if so, what can you do to create a better timetable? Is it personality clashes? If so, can you address and fix those issues? To whom can you turn for guidance, mentoring? And is this really a problem or just annoying? Remember your nursing process. Assess the situation. Identify the problem. Create a goal. And look for interventions. Take care of yourself. And then evaluate what works and what doesn't work. And then adjust your plan if you have to. You're well on your way to becoming a professional registered nurse. And your leadership skills are already there. They're simply waiting to be honed by experience. Have a great night, guys.